Okay, thanks, Akansha. Okay, we'll wait for us some time now till other people join in. Okay, now there are people joining in. Okay, all of you, I have just put something in your chat box. Just go through it. Okay, there are certain things, and I'm not going to be going into details because it's not needed for political science point of view. But if you want to, read a little bit more about it, then I've written down whatever is to be read. Only those three topics you can read if you want to go into details of a topic. It's not necessary. I'm leaving that upon you. So it's voluntary. All right. So if you want to read about Alipur bomb conspiracy, Anushilan Samiti and Yugantar Samiti, etc., please feel free to do it. Okay, I think we'll start. Other people can join in. Okay. Now, any which ways, we are on Indian political thought. All right. So I've already told you what is Danda Shastra and what is Dharma Shastra. So we have covered under Danda Shastra, we have covered Artha Shastra. All right. That is your Kautilya's theory. So in that Shat policy was there, Saptanga theory was there, Mandal theory was there. All right. Now, after that, we came to Dharma Shastra, that is Manusmriti, especially Manu. All right. So you know that Manusmriti talks about social order, while Danda Shastra, because Artha Shastra belongs to Danda Shastra tradition, it basically is concentrating on power, politics, external relations, etc. Then we came to Buddhist traditions. All right. Now, after Buddhist traditions, now today we are going to be dealing with Sri Aurobindo. Okay, Aurobindo Ghosh, basically. But in our paper, he's called as Sri Aurobindo in your syllabus. So we'll take the same name and go ahead. All right, comparatively very small, but he is going to help you in understanding this part of your Indian political thought. See, when I told you about certain features of Indian political thought, I had spoken to you about the second concept, spiritualism. Okay, spiritualism meaning politics and religion coexist. He's going to talk about this concept of spiritualism. All right. So whatever I'm going to be teaching you about features is going to be reflected in your political thought also. Okay. So now when you talk about Sri Aurobindo, okay, he was born in 1972 and was sent to England for further studies. Okay. In 1893, he returned back to India. This is just his basic introduction to understand what he's all about. All right. He was filled with patriotic fervor. He became a strong nationalist and began writing about political situation in India. Now you can see that basically, I'm sorry, this is 1892, not 1972. Okay, 1872 to 1893. Okay, so this is the period when you already know that India had fallen into the hands of political control of the Britishers. So we were now absolutely a colony of the Britishers. All right. So because of this, even if he went to England, all right, who were our colonial masters, when he came back, he was filled with patriotic fervor. Okay, and he became a strong nationalist and began writing about political situation in India because people needed to be educated. If you remember when I taught you Gramsci, okay, that's the time when I told you that what role Mahatma Gandhi played in actually removing the hegemony, removing the role of civil society that was blocking India's view about seeing the exploitative nature of the British colonialism. All right. So I have already told you there were moderates who believed that yes, British rule is good for India. It's a blessing in disguise, but it's still a blessing. Okay, because education is getting improved, infrastructure is getting improved. So Britishers are not that bad. This is what moderates believed. While on the other hand, the extremists absolutely saw through the Britishers. They realized that, listen, Britishers are here only for their own profit making. All right. So if they're here only for their profit making, they have no interest in developing India or doing anything for Indians as such. Whatever is happening is just as a byproduct of whatever they're doing for themselves. So that's the reason why Indian freedom struggle before advent of Mahatma Gandhi was divided into two groups. There was moderate group and there was extremist group. All right. Now, when you talk about Sri Aurobindo, Aurobindo is the influence behind the extremist group. All right. That's the reason why when he was filled with patriotic fervor and everything, he was a very strong nationalist. And he belonged to that extremist group who believed that, listen, Britishers are not here to help India, neither are they here to help Indians or change our society for the better. They're here for profit making, they are here for their own selfish interest, and our independence is the most important concept. All right. So how did it start? It started with writing series of articles which were published in Indu Prakash. Okay, it was a daily in 1894, but it was discontinued as articles were considered to be too radical. See, because you were used to a particular way of thought, all right, and you have to understand when you're talking about 19th century, all right, we were not a very cohesive unit. We were always divided into different kingdoms. So we had never thought about being together as a country called India. All right, even if we had a territory called Indian subcontinent, we were not completely united. All right, so because of that, the first thing that had to be done was creating this nationalist feeling, the patriotic feeling of togetherness, and bringing us together and making us one cohesive unit was the first task. Second task was to explain to all of us that listen, Britishers are not here for our benefit, they are here for their own selfish interest. So all of this required telling the people that listen, you're being exploited. All right, the same concept of Gramsci, understanding the civil society and its hegemony and removing that doctrine and creating new truth so that people actually start believing the new truth. So this is exactly what was going to happen, or this is exactly what Shri Aurobindo was trying to do through publishing his articles, but they were discontinued because they were very radical. I told you he was extremist. Okay, he was a strong nationalist, so definitely he was not the one who was talking about prayer, petition, protest, etc. of the moderates. So definitely he was talking about a little extremist attitude taken towards the Britishers, and that's the reason why those articles were found to be very radical. All right, he was against the concept of prayer, petition, protest, concept of the moderates of Indian National Congress. See, because moderates, now we are not here to judge whether they were right or wrong. Everybody has their own belief system. All right. But the moderates had their own reason to believe the Britishers were good for India. They were a blessing in disguise. So for them, they did not want to overthrow the Britishers or British rule. Okay, the maximum spoke about was concept of Swaraj, and their concept was basically focused on prayer. First, prayer, beg with the Britishers that okay, listen, this act is not right. Don't do this. Don't do that. If that doesn't happen, petition against them. And if that doesn't work, then the last concept is protest. All right, but non-violent protest, of course, because they are moderates. All right, so concept of moderates of Indian National Congress was very well known, but because Aurobindo Ghosh was kind of extremist and was the brainchild behind the extremist movement in India, definitely he was opposed to this concept of prayer, petition, and protest. Okay, he believed that due to conflict between the moderates and the extremists, little progress was made in the direction of Indian independence. See, Indian history, if you study, okay, you will always see that most of the times we became a victim of foreign invasions because we ourselves internally were never united. We were always divided into various kingdoms, different polities who were constantly fighting with each other. So because there was no political cohesiveness internally, we became easy prey for external aggressions to happen, external invasions to happen. Abdali is the best example of this because Delhi Sultanate was Delhi Mughal Empire under at that period of time was very weak. Abdali could come, loot, and go back. Okay, because we were absolutely not united. Even for that reason, 1857, one of the reasons for failure of 1857 was because we were not very united. We were not a cohesive unit fighting against the Britishers. That's exactly what changed when Mahatma Gandhi came, because Mahatma Gandhi unified us, made us realize that, listen, Britishers have their selfish interest and we have to fight for our independence. Nobody's going to come and hand it over to us on a platter. So because of this, even Aurobindo Ghosh believed that, listen, there is a problem. There's a problem that we are always divided within ourselves. Okay. Nobody is questioning the moderates or the extremists. Both of them wanted Indian independence. Both of them wanted good for India. They had their different means. But because of their differences over the means as to get the goal, okay, that was the issue. So basically, because of this conflict of concentrating only on means to achieve the goal was getting neglected, and the goal was Indian independence or Swaraj, whatever, self-rule, whatever you want to call it. So because of this, he started realizing that, listen, we really need to do something and bring people together. All right, and then start fighting against the Britishers. Rather than fighting amongst ourselves, we have to fight against the common enemy that all of us have. He accepted a teaching job for 14 years in Baroda, but he was the brainchild behind emerging radical movement. Radical movement is nothing but your extremist movement. Okay, in 1905, Lord Curzon partitioned Bengal, which led to upsurge of patriotism in India. This was the first time that it became, it was like an eye opener for the moderates also. Extremists, any which ways, knew about it, about how the Britishers were. But it was 1905, the partition of Bengal. The reason was given administrative convenience, all right, but that was not true. It was basically to divide India, divide and rule concept, all right, and create issues of communalism. All right. So basically, after this partition happened, even the moderates started realizing that yes, what the revolutionaries were saying, what the extremists were saying is to some extent true, because Britishers have their own selfish interest. Okay, so whatever the layer was, that the wheel that because of which the moderates could not see the real character of the Britishers was lifted by the Britishers themselves by partitioning Bengal in 1905. I've already told you it was annulled in 1911, but the damage for the Britishers was done by that time. Okay, so even if he was teaching in Baroda, after this he moved to Calcutta and actively participated in politics for 5 years. Now you can read about the Alipur case, okay, that I've written about. He was also a member of Anushilan Samiti. Anushilan Samiti was one of the, it was basically said to be bodybuilding committee, all right, but that was only a hogwash. Okay, for major reasons, it was basically one of the most revolutionary groups in India. And then Yugantar I'll speak about when I come and teach you about M.N. Roy. Okay, both of them, Anushilan Samiti as well as this independent branch that was Yugantar, were involved in revolutionary activities, extremist activities. All right. So there was this case which happened wherein British Raj officials were targeted. All right. So assassination attempts were made or something like that, because revolutionaries wanted to create havoc so that Britishers leave India as soon as possible. So here in Alipur case conspiracy, basically there was a magistrate, a British Raj magistrate, Kingsford, who was, there was an attempt to kill him or attempt to assassinate him, and in that controversy, Aurobindo Ghosh and his brother were imprisoned. Okay, and that entire case is called as Alipur case conspiracy. This is only what you need to know. If you want to know in more details, you're free to go and research as much as you want on it. Okay, he was imprisoned for an year, and upon the release, he launched New English Weekly, Karma Yogin, and Bengal Weekly. His passionate editorial in Bande Mataram and Karma Yogin became an inspiration for revolutionaries. Okay. Class, what happens is, see, there was only one way of reaching the people, all right? And that was through press, through telling the people that yes, we have to be together, because India was an uneducated country. Plus, why these were in English were because these English people, okay, the people who were educated, all right, in India also were basically of the, they were basically the parts of the moderates who believed that British rule is not that bad. So to make them also realize, okay, that's the reason why there was weekly magazines in English, so that even the Western educated people in India start realizing the exploitative nature of the British rule, and they can come together with the peasants and become a cohesive unit to fight against the British rule. His writings showed great erudition meaning great knowledge and learning with patriotism. So it showed knowledge, it made you understand logically what he was trying to tell you. And plus, there was this fervor of nationalism which was attached to it. This is how you develop nationalist feelings. Okay, so that was his way through writings, etc., of trying to promote nationalism, trying to promote patriotism, so that people realize that yes, we have to be together to fight against a common enemy. His philosophy during this period was called as spiritual nationalism. See, spiritual nationalism. Okay, so now we're not just going to talk about fighting against the Britishers, it's also going to concentrate on the features of Indian political thought, spiritualism. I'll stop here for a minute. Class, have you understood till now? Have you understood till now? Okay,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
Aditi, Anjali, Himanshu, Akansha, Kritika, Tejas, have you understood? Okay, okay, fine. Now, his philosophy during this period was called as spiritual nationalism. It revolved around India as a mother who was enslaved by foreign aggressors and needed to be rescued. He believed that India was a spiritual entity as well as a geographical entity that could lead humanity to spiritual perfection. Yes, there were two concepts. First, yes, he wanted to bring that nationalism, patriotism, fair fervor in India. Okay. And second thing was he also concentrated on the concept of spiritual nationalism. So his focus was not just political freedom, political independence, or what at that period of time was called as Swaraj, self-rule. We were not even talking about independence. Okay. So what his focus, what Sri Aurobindo's focus was, yes, he was a revolutionary. Yes, he believed in extremism. Yes, he believed that India had to be cohesive. India had to be brought together to fight against the Britishers. But but his focus was not just independence of India or political independence of India. He believed that India is a spiritual entity. And that's the reason why his complete focus is called as spiritual nationalism. Nationalism, you understand, is patriotism, love for your country, the feeling of patriotism for your country, love of feeling of belonging to a particular nation is your concept of nationalism. It's a feeling. All right. So spiritual nationalism meant, yes, feeling for your country, but understanding that India is not just a geographical entity. All right. It's not just a territory. India has far more important things to do. And what was the far more important thing to do? He said, spiritually enlightening the people of the world too. Okay, so not just getting independence, political independence. India had to become independent not just politically but also spiritually, because it needed to lead the way to show the world how you can be enlightened, how you can move beyond the current realm that all of us know about. So India was a spiritual entity, not just a geographical entity, which could lead humanity to spiritual perfection. Okay. India under British rule was enslaved, and therefore nationalism was spiritual sadhana, because we were enslaved and we could not do anything. So see, if you remember, there was always these depictions of Indian subcontinent before independence as Mother India. Okay. Wherein Bangladesh, or that time East and West Pakistan and everything, contributed to that entire picture of India as a mother. All right. The same concept he's putting forward. All right. He's saying that, listen, India, that is our mother, is basically enslaved by the Britishers. And let's not just talk about political enslavement. Okay. India is also enslaved spiritually, because India is not just a geographical entity, not just a territory that is present in Indian subcontinent or in South Asia or in the world. India has much bigger role to play in the world. Rather than just getting political independence, she is going to be the spiritual master for the world. So India had to fight this British rule, because this Britishers had enslaved India, that is our motherland. Okay. And because of that, because of we being enslaved, because India being enslaved, India cannot play the role of being a spiritual master to the world. So we had two things to do. First, get political independence, and second, end all the bondages that India is suffering and let her become the spiritual leader of the world. Okay. And that is going to be our spiritual sadhana. This spiritualism, this spiritual sadhana is going to be your nationalism, fighting for your political freedom as well as your spiritual freedom of your country. That's why India under Britishers, even though it was enslaved, it was going to be our nationalism, which was going to be our spiritual sadhana, a moral endeavor, because we had to it was our moral responsibility to remove all the bindings, remove all the chains that India was facing because of the British rule, so that she could take a role of being the spiritual leader of the world. So, fighting for our independence was our spiritual sadhana, it was our moral endeavor. I've already told you, see, India generally was very God-fearing people. So I've already told you, divine theory, social contract theory, king having divine personality, all of this was only told because obedience was to be gained of the people. This is also the same thing. All right. It is also the same thing. It is a tool to develop the feeling of nationalism, wherein you just don't look at it from a very external point of view, but try to understand that, listen, fighting for our nation, fighting for our motherland, fighting for the independence of our motherland is required not just for political freedom, but also for making her become and helping India fulfill her karma of being the spiritual leader of the world. So it was our moral endeavor to fight against the Britishers. So see, he's bringing the concept of morality. He's appealing to your morals, to your values, and telling you that, listen, India is enslaved. India is a motherland. She's enslaved. So we need to fight. We need to come together, fight, and that is going to be our moral sadhana. He felt that independence of India was essential to fulfill her destiny as a spiritual guide to humanity. I've already told you that. Thus, Swaraj cannot be fully realized by political independence alone, but in resumption by India as a spiritual guide to the mankind. See, I told you, independence as a concept came very later. All right. Earlier, we were only talking about self rule. All right. Self rule meant autonomy, a little bit of autonomy. Britishers can continue, but we'll have our own self rule. Later on, we started realizing no, we have to talk about complete independence. But that was only after advent of Gandhi when we started becoming a cohesive unit. All right. So earlier, Swaraj could not be fully under realized by political independence alone, but only in resumption by India as a spiritual guide to mankind. I've already explained this point. Hinduism was a basis of India's past greatness and essence of nationalism, thus means of liberating her and laying foundations of modern India. So he was saying that, listen, Hinduism till together, till since ancient India, had kept India united. Even though foreign aggressions happened, Delhi Sultanate came, then Mughal Empire came, we were still together. So Hinduism was a basis of India's past greatness, okay? And thus, because all of us belong to one religion, we should all come together and it should become the essence of our nationalism. Thus, it becomes a means of liberating India and laying foundations of modern India. Class, again, I have told you with all the political thinkers, it is Shri Aurobindo's views about it. All right. So we have to take a third person view or a bird's eye view about it. All right. He says that Hinduism is a basis of India's past greatness and a sense of nationalism, thus means of liberating her. So he's using religion here as a tool. Remember what Machiavelli said? Use religion if it's going to help you in bringing people together and unification of Italy. Use religion, but don't bring morality into politics. The concept, the first concept comes here, that if it is going to help you to bring people together, because majority of Indians were Hindus, it was used as a tool wherein we were told that, listen, wherein Sri Aurobindo is trying to tell us that, listen, it's a moral endeavor, it is a spiritual sadhana to get independence or to get Swaraj for our country. And Hinduism is a tool because it is always seen to it that India was united. Hinduism was always a tool that led to past greatness. India was called as Sone ki Chidiya, all of that. So he's applying your mind and he's telling you, go back to your past and see how strong we were as a nation. So now we have to bring back that past greatness again. And Hinduism can be a tool to bring all of us together, and through our coming together, this will lead to our moral endeavor, that is our spiritual sadhana, to bring people together and to get independence for India. So he believed that India's greatness was in spirituality and her strength came from this spirit. Thus, nationalist movements were reawakening of India's soul. You go to Rishikesh even today, you'll see so many foreigners. Of course, now because of COVID, things will be changed. All right. But there are a lot of foreigners who come to India for this concept of spirituality, whether it is Vipassana, whether it is any other meditations, transcendental meditations, etc. India is seen as a spiritual hub of the world. Okay, so that's the same concept that even Sri Aurobindo was talking about. Okay, we'll stop here for a second. Class, have you understood? It's a little tricky thing to understand, but have you understood? Otherwise, I'll explain again. Okay, thanks, Aditi. What about rest of you? Mansi, Kritika, Anjali, Himanshu, Akansha, Tejas. Okay, fine. So, Hinduism was a basis, I've already told you that. He believed that India's greatness was in spirituality and her strength came from this spirit, the concept of spirituality. The nationalist movement was basically a reawakening of India's soul. He stated in Bande Mataram that nationalism is not mere a political program, it is a religion that came from God. See, class, I've again told you this is to gain obedience of the people. It's a tool which is used. So he said nationalism is not just a political program, because nationalism is patriotism, is generally associated with political identity of a country. All right. So he said nationalism is not just a political program, it is a religion that has come from God. So now he's equating nationalism also with religion. Because I told you, India was God fearing, always a religious country. So he's saying, listen, this concept of nationalism, this concept of spiritual sadhana, that is your nationalism, is your moral endeavor. All right. And this moral endeavor is something that you have to do. It is your dharma, and you have to do because it is a religion that has come from God. So he is trying to appeal to that sentimentality, that God fearing nature of human beings that was present in India, so that people come together as a means of cohesion. The moderates in India had dismissed him as a mystique. Mystic because he's talking about spiritualism, etc. Plus, he was the brain behind your rational, radical, as well as your extremist movement in India. So definitely, moderates had dismissed him as a mystique. But Lord Minto, then Viceroy, considered him as the most dangerous man we have to deal with. See, because these people like Aurobindo, are the brain behind extremist movement. They are the ones who are going to be telling the people, helping the people to understand, build up nationalism, build up this patriotic feeling, and getting people together to fight against the Britishers. He is the one who is like a kingpin who's going to hold the entire movement together, plus motivate also. So they are like the demagogue kinds. So that's the reason why the British Raj could understand that yes, he's one of the most dangerous men they had to counter during the early phases of Indian freedom struggle. So Sri Aurobindo was a thinker of great importance in modern Indian political thought, as his work laid the foundation for national movement under Mahatma Gandhi. This cohesion, this coming together, unifying together and fighting against an enemy for nation, for that concept of spiritual sadhana, okay, the moral endeavor, etc., was all already imbibed in Indian politics. It was imbibed in Indian people through his writings, etc. Okay, so because of that, the momentum was already created. All right. Plus, you had people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, etc., also fighting to bring people together. Ganesh festival was also a tool to get people together to become a cohesive unit. So all of this played a role, finally led to culmination when Mahatma Gandhi came into Indian political scenario. The already the foundation work of creating a cohesion was already done by Shri Aurobindo, by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and even by moderates to some extent through their means. So it was only left to Mahatma Gandhi to get them together through those movements and finally get our independence. So basically, you have to just conclude saying he reflected the spiritual side of Indian political thought. Okay. Class, this is your Sri Aurobindo, nothing more. Just remember the works he has done. All right. Second thing you have to remember about Sri Aurobindo is the concept of spiritual nationalism. That word has to come in your answer. All right. So as long as you write those 2 points, you can write Sri Aurobindo in your own words. Plus in chat, I've already put up all the controversies associated with him, plus the secret societies he was associated with, Anushilan Samiti, etc. If you want, you can read about it. Do you have any questions, or shall I go on with the next political thinker? Anybody has any questions? Okay, 1 second. Okay. Class, compared to your Western political thought, Indian political thought seems very small, right? It gets over very quickly, except I think Kautilya. Kautilya was a little lengthy, but rest everything is pretty small. Class, are you there with me? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay. So shall I continue? Shall I continue? Okay. Okay. Next, M.N. Roy. Now, when you talk about M.N. Roy, you have to understand that he was one person who has seen the almost entire Indian freedom struggle under Mahatma Gandhi. All right. So you're going to see he's going to be a little critical of Mahatma Gandhi. Then he changes his views. I put in everything in the slides here. All right. M.N. Roy, Madhavendra Nath Roy, is one of the most learned thinkers and writers of Indian political thought. As a thinker, we witness a transformation in his views as his political philosophy shows a connection to the events of his own life. See, everybody undergoes changes. Like I told you, even with Plato, when Plato wrote the Republic, he was young. He was very angered because of that execution of Socrates, plus whatever was happening because of the defeat of Athens at the hands of Sparta. He was very angry with the current political scenario in Athens, and that's why he wanted to overthrow the rule of democracy and bring the rule of philosopher king. So you see, but when he comes to the later books of his, you see he's undergone a transformation. All right, you see that even he starts becoming a little moderate, little conservative, just like Aristotle. All right, that's the same thing that everybody says. It's like a transition. You're going through a particular transition. When you are young, you're more angry. As you start maturing, you change your views. You change is the only constant. That's the only thing we always hear about. Same thing, and there were his certain views which underwent a particular change because of his experiences, as well as certain events that took place in his life. He started his career as a revolutionary nationalist and was a member of Yugantar Society. If you study about Sri Aurobindo and you study about Anushilan Samiti, Yugantar Society was also one of the independent offshoots of Anushilan Society Samiti. And it was basically associated with your revolutionary movements in Bengal. All right. So if you want to read more, I've already told you. You can search about it. On his way to Mexico, he got influenced by communism. He established the Communist Party of Mexico. When he went to Mexico, he had already got influence with communism and helped establishment of the Communist Party of Mexico, and was acknowledged as an important authority on communism, especially on colonial issues. You have to understand, communism, yes, he was influenced by it. Helped in establishing Communist Party of Mexico, but because he was coming from India, which was already colonialized, all right, so he wanted to think about communism from colonial point of view. All right, so he was considered as an important authority on somebody who had own opinions, strong opinions on communism, especially with relation to colonial issues, because he was an Indian. He knew what colonialism meant. He was invited to Communist International by Lenin to outline the strategy on the issue of communism. But owing to the differences of opinion, he was ousted in 1928-29 and he returned back to India. Lenin wanted the communist revolution in colonies to be in two stages. Support the nationalist movement as communism was not well established in the colonies, and enter into a temporary alliance with national bourgeois. Okay, I'll underline this. Okay, so Lenin wanted to support the nationalist movement as communism was not well established in the colonies, and enter into a temporary alliance with national bourgeois to decolonialize the country, but to maintain the communist ideology. Later, overthrowing the ruling party and establishing communist takeover. Plus, there was a difference of opinion. Now, I'll tell you Lenin's opinion first, then we'll come to M. Roy's opinion. Now, because Lenin, okay, he belonged to Soviet Union. All of us have heard about Lenin, all right? Now, when you talk about Lenin, he has given his own interpretation to Marxism. So, he had his own ideas about the concept of communism, all right? Now, basically, all of us know communism wanted to spread, Lenin wanted to spread communism as much as possible. So he had his own views about how to go about establishing communism in colonial countries. Okay, so there were a lot of colonial powers, okay, and a lot of colonial countries. So European countries, whether it was France, Netherlands, UK, they were all colonial masters. Spain, they were all colonial masters. So because of this, all right, there were a lot of countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America who were colonialized. So these countries were the target audience for Lenin. Lenin wanted to bring about communism in these countries, because see, these are the countries who are facing colonialism. Colonialism is basically nothing but your capitalism. Okay, capitalism is related to what? Liberalism. So they were facing the consequences of liberalism. So what was the opposite of liberalism? Communism or socialism or Marxism, whatever you want to call it as. So basically, to fight the capitalism in form of colonialism, communism wanted to be wanted to be put in or established to fight against the liberal colonial powers. So that's the reason why Lenin felt that, listen, in colonies, basically now they have already seen the worst of capitalism. They've seen the worst of colonial powers. So they will definitely not want to go with capitalism. They will rather want to go for the other opposite. So that other opposite was communism. So that's the reason why he wanted to target these national movements in colonial countries, so that in case they get their independence, they may shift to communism, they may adopt communism. So what was his approach? Lenin's approach was, listen, the concept of Faustian bargain. Why Faustian bargain? He says, listen, what is our end result? What is the objective that we have in our mind? Objective is establishing communism in newly independent countries or current colonial countries who may gain their independence in the near future. So now, if that is our goal of establishing communism and expansionism of communism to colonial countries, what do we need to do? First, we need to go and become a member or go and start helping the national bourgeois, okay, to decolonialize the country. You have to fight a freedom struggle. You have to see to it that a colonial country gets independence, then communism can come in. All right, so first, help the colonial country get independence by making an alliance or entering an alliance with national bourgeois. Okay, then second step, decolonize the country. That means overthrow the colonial rule. And next, once the colonial rule is overthrown, once the colonial powers are thrown out of the country, then these national bourgeois, the ruling party, also should be overthrown and established communist party to take over. Class, you have to understand, Lenin is giving his own ideas to it. As I told you when I was teaching you Karl Marx believed in stateless society. He did not want a state. He believed in withering away of a state. All right. And he did not even believe in establishing communist party. Lenin had his own views. When I taught you Marxism, I've told you this, that Lenin was targeting not capitalism. Lenin was targeting feudalism. Second, Lenin did not believe in going away or withering away of a state. He believed in keeping a state intact. Plus, he wanted to keep Communist Party to maintain the reign of a communist state. So he is absolutely digressing from whatever Karl Marx was saying. So that's the reason why Marxism is theoretical. Lenin was applying the principles to suit his needs. All right. Okay, we'll stop here for a second. Class, have you understood till now? Anjali, Indian thoughts are relatable. Yeah, Anjali, because we are Indians, so we see these thoughts every day almost, right? That's why they're more relatable. Okay, anybody else has any questions? Have you understood till now? Have you understood what Lenin is talking about? Class? Okay, Aditi has understood, Anjali has understood. Others, Aditi Gaikwad, Himanshu has understood. Tejas, Mansi, have you understood? Okay, I'm going to imply that you have understood now. Okay, so you have to understand here that, see, there is a difference. What did Karl Marx say? The entire Karl Marx theory was to overthrow the bourgeois. His entire theory that we studied was to overthrow the capitalist class. Lenin is talking about entering a temporary alliance with the bourgeois class. So he's absolutely digressing from whatever the basic tenets of communism were. So he's talking about establishing communism as a state policy. He's talking about Communist Party establishing its rule. See here. Okay. Plus, he's even talking about entering into an alliance with the bourgeois. Bourgeois were basically the numero uno enemy of your Marxism. All right. But Lenin says, no, if we want to establish communism in colonies, we will have to enter a temporary alliance with national bourgeois. It's a Faustian bargain. All right. So, but what is our end result? End result is establishing of a communist party. So we will enter into a temporary alliance with national bourgeois. What will we do? We will overthrow the colonial power. Once independence is achieved, overthrow these national bourgeois party also and establish communist party. So once communist party is established, of course, the government is going to be Communist Party, plus the country is going to be communist. So that was his view. Later on, he said, once you overthrow the ruling party, Communist Party will take over. Thus, colonial powers will be overthrown, the capitalist powers will be overthrown, and these newly established colonial countries will have a better alternative in communism. Okay, we'll have a better alternative in communism. So he's absolutely going against the basic tenets of Marxism to suit his ideology. This was exactly what was pointed out, okay, by M. Roy. M. Roy wasn't convinced and wanted to maintain the orthodox position of not supporting bourgeois. That's the reason why Lenin and M. Roy got into conflict, because M. Roy believed that, listen, when you're talking about communism, communism is nothing but the basic concept of Karl Marx. Karl Marx is one person who's absolutely against capitalism. Okay, he's against bourgeois. His entire theory of revolution, his entire theory of class struggle is to overthrow the bourgeois class. And Lenin, you're talking about making an alliance, even though temporary. You're talking about making a temporary alliance with a national bourgeois. You're going against the basic tenets of communism. So that is not right. We can't do that. Okay. So this is the reason why M. N. Roy said, no, 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 we cannot, for whatever reasons, how much ever good our aim is to establish communism in colonial countries, we cannot go against the basic tenet of Marxism. We cannot enter into an alliance with the national bourgeois, because that way we'll be betraying the basic concepts of Marxism. So M. N. Roy said that, listen, he felt that bourgeois would later any which ways compromise with the imperialist or with the colonial power and betray the communist ideology and goal of ultimate freedom. So his reasoning was, first, let's not go against the basic tenets of Marxism. And second, he said, look, bourgeois people are the ones who are basically, who have power, economic power as well as political power. So you cannot trust these bourgeois people. For them, profit is everything. Okay. So because profit is everything, power is everything for them, tomorrow there may be a chance, or if they get a chance, they may even compromise with the imperialist powers. They may even compromise with the colonial powers and betray the communist ideology and goal of ultimate freedom. So if we tomorrow support these national bourgeois party or national bourgeois, okay, in a particular colonial country, you cannot be sure that these national bourgeois people will fight for final independence. No, tomorrow they may compromise with the imperialist, with the colonialist, to keep their power intact, to keep their money intact. So, and betray your concept of freedom. So we cannot trust the bourgeois. One, because it's going against the concept of Marxism. Second, because these bourgeois people are very selfish. They're very self-interested. They're only concerned with their own profits. They're concerned only with their own profit making. So tomorrow, for their own profit making, for their own selfish interest, they may even betray the freedom struggle. Okay? They may even betray us. So we cannot believe them. We should rather go back to the proletariat people. Let's go to the proletariat people and bring them together and then fight against the colonial powers. So this led to a conflict between Lenin, who believed that national bourgeois should come have a temporary alliance with the communism, with Communist Party, and finally, after the independence is achieved, overthrow the bourgeois and establish the Communist Party, and the colonial country becomes a communist state. But M. N. Roy said, no, if you go and enter into an alliance with national bourgeois, what are you doing ultimately is betraying Marxism. So that cannot be done. Plus, you cannot trust national bourgeois. They are selfish people. They may tomorrow betray you, betray the communist, and enter into an alliance with the capitalist or the colonial powers and forget about independence. They will again betray the communist ideology too. So let's not go and make any alliance with your national bourgeois. So he said, if you want to bring about communism, the only way you can do it is through direct action. Okay, through direct action. Go for direct action of communist revolution in India, as revolution can be brought by proletariat class, but not by proletariat and bourgeois combined. That's what Marx said. Bourgeois as well as proletariat class are antithetical. There is a thesis, there is an antithesis. These are the two ones. and there can be no synthesis about this class. Agar synthesis hota, to Marxism wouldn't have spoken about theory of revolution and theory of class struggle and violent overthrow of the bourgeois class. So there can be no synthesis. Okay, the dialectics that I've taught you, there is a thesis, there is an antithesis, good elements come together to create synthesis. There is no concept of synthesis here. Marxism also does not speak about bourgeois and proletariat coming together. They are conflicting classes. They are supposed to be always conflicting classes, and one class is supposed to overthrow the other. For according to Marx, it was going to be the proletariat class overthrowing the bourgeois class. So that's what M. N. Roy said. Don't betray the basic tenets of Marxism. Second, you cannot trust the bourgeois. Tomorrow they may betray their own people and they may betray the communist ideology too. So if you want to bring about a revolution, you want to establish communism in India, only way is direct action. Go into direct action. Go to the people, go to the proletariat, go to the working class, tell them that you're being exploited by the colonial powers, you're being exploited by the colonist powers, and you have to come together and overthrow the capitalist class. So direct action through proletariat class only. He says no going for a bourgeois proletariat class combined, because that is a recipe for disaster. Because these two classes are antithetical to each other. They are opposition. Okay, they cannot come together. So here the unity of opposite, the concept of your Hegel cannot be applied, because they cannot come together. They are going to be conflicting. That's the reason why the entire Marxist theory is based on conflict between bourgeois and proletariat. So communists should rather support the proletariat people, the common man, working people, you and me. We should be supported and we should be brought together by a communist ideology to overthrow the rule of colonial powers in India. Plus, he was very critical of Mahatma Gandhi and called Mahatma Gandhi weak nationalist and supporter of bourgeois. All right, this is M. N. Roy's views. Okay, we'll stop here for a second. Class, have you understood till now? Have you understood what Lenin wanted to bring about? That he wanted a temporary alliance with the bourgeois. M. N. Roy said nothing of this sort. Go back to proletariat. Do not betray the basic tenets of Marxism. All right. Only this much you have to understand. That's the reason why he was thrown out and he came back to India. Okay. Next. So we can categorize his journey, M. N. Roy's journey, into three phases. First was 1920 to 1930, where you can see various shades of his political thinking. All right. He started as a revolutionary. He was a member of the Yugantar committee. Okay. He was member of Yugantar group, but got disillusioned, okay, with it and turned towards Marxism. I told you, while going to Mexico, he became influenced by communism. And that's the reason why he played a very instrumental role in establishing the Communist Party of Mexico. During this period of time, this 10 years, 1920 to 1930, he was critical of Indian National Congress as well as Mahatma Gandhi. All right. See, 1920s and 1930s is a period when your non-cooperation movement was done. Okay. And almost 1930, ending 1931, your civil disobedience had still to start. So this was here only seen your non-cooperation movement during his phase one. Okay. But non-cooperation movement was our first movement of coming together. Second phase. Okay. In second phase, of course, he debated with Lenin and he was thrown out of the Communist International. This is I've already told you. Second phase is 1930 to 1940. Okay. He starts reconciliation with the Indian National Congress, because he starts realizing that, listen, Indian National Congress is very influential. Okay. And one day or the other, because in 1930s, we were not sure when we are going to get independence. Indian National Congress with Mahatma Gandhi are going to play instrumental role in Indian independence whenever we get it. So he had reconciled with Indian National Congress because it was one of the prima donnas of your Indian freedom struggle. It was a very influential institution too. So he reconciled with Indian National Congress. He attempted to radicalize Indian National Congress from within. He joined Indian National Congress too. Okay. But later on, after joining Indian National Congress, there was also a period of time when he tried to bring about a change in Indian National Congress through internally. Okay. Next, critical reflection of principles of Marxism. Now he started questioning Marxism also, ki whether Marxism is right or wrong, etc. And next, because he was finally disillusioned with all of it. Once he joined Indian National Congress, he tried to radicalize it from within. But Indian National Congress had certain prima donnas like Jawaharlal Nehru, etc., who were very strong personalities. So to bring about any change in Indian National Congress, okay, was very difficult. All right. Plus, to create your own state of Indian National Congress was also very difficult, because there were Mahatma Gandhi, there was Jawaharlal Nehru, who were these larger than life people. Okay, and these were demagogues. They could, change opinion of the people easily. So because of that, Indian National Congress was mostly dominated by Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc. So he could not bring about the changes that he wanted to bring about in Indian National Congress. Plus, whatever experiences he had in his first phase with Lenin, all right, the conflict that happened, etc., he had a lot of time to now start reflecting on principles of Marxism as well as Indian National Congress, etc. So he was absolutely disillusioned by the time end of 1940s came. And so finally, he was disillusioned with Marxism. He was disillusioned with Indian freedom struggle, especially Indian National Congress and role of Mahatma Gandhi. He finally came up with his concept of radical humanism. So this is his third phase from 1940s onwards, which is called as his theory. He comes up with his own concept of radical humanism. Okay, his views on radical humanism were found in his works like Beyond Communism, Reason, Romanticism and Revolution, and Politics, Power and Parties. These were the works in which we find his views about radical humanism. That was his own theory. It is a philosophy of freedom and cosmopolitan union of spiritually liberated people. It is a concept of freedom. Okay. It is humanism. What is humanism? Enlightenment. When I taught you about enlightenment, I told you it is about humanism, this humanistic feeling that yes, human beings are also important. This concept of humanism, their interest, their attitude is also important. Not just political issues, not just economic issues, etc. Even human being, his own development of his personality, etc., is also important. That is covered under your concept of humanism, that human being as a unit is also given importance. So radical humanism is basically a philosophy of freedom. Okay, and it was a cosmopolitan union of spiritually liberated persons. Okay, because again it is Indian political thought, so of course spirituality is going to come in. We are going to talk about spiritual nature of Indian people. All right, so it's radical humanism is nothing but a philosophy of freedom. The system of governance will be grassroots or radical democracy, as state curtails freedom, hence decentralization is necessary for freedom. He wanted grassroots or radical democracy. Your Panchayati Raj, when I teach you constitution, when you go to Panchayati Raj, okay, that's the third tier. In India, we have three tiers now. First is your central government, second are your state governments, third is your grassroots democracy under your Panchayati Raj. So, because he was so disillusioned with Marxism as well as whatever was happening on the political scene, he came up with this concept of radical humanism, which is basically a philosophy of freedom. But he wanted to concentrate on the political issues also. So he said that, listen, a system of government should be the concept of one which is based on grassroots or radical democracy. All right, because state curtails freedom, hence decentralization is necessary for freedom. See, if you have to enjoy freedom, I cannot have anybody controlling every aspect of your life. Even if it is an organ as important as a state, it cannot control everything. Class, now you have to understand, listen, he was influenced by communism. So, of course, even Marx had a very negative view of a state. I told you, Marx considered state to be nothing but a exploitative device in the hands of your bourgeois. He felt that the state was pro-capitalist and anti-proletariat. So Marxism had a very negative view of a state. And that's the reason why he said state will wither away, because once a dictatorship of the proletariat is established, state has no reason to be there. All right, because people will take care of everything. All right, so because everybody is going to get everything according to their work, according to their ability, State is not required to maintain law and order. Everything is in proportion. Everything is decided properly by the workers, by the proletariat. State will have no reason to exist. State will wither away. Sorry. So because M.N. Roy was so influenced by Marxism, he also believed that, yes, listen, state should be given as limited as work as possible. Okay. More work should be done by the decentralized authorities that are present at the grassroots level. So at village level, municipality level, or even at state level or at provincial level, the people should have more importance or should have more role to play in decision making, because state curtails freedom. State tells you to do this, not to do this, do that, don't do that. So it curtails your freedom. Okay, so radical democracy or the grassroots democracy is the best way to continue with a polity, because it will give each one of us a right to have a say in your political administration. And plus it will be decentralized, so each one of us will have power, and not just the state who will have power to tell us to do what and what not to do. Plus, giving so much of power to state, giving so much of centralized power to state, to some extent curtails our freedom. And that freedom is basic concept. See, his philosophy of freedom is the basis of your radical humanism. So for him, freedom was more important. And that's the reason why he says the state should be limited. Maximum power, it should be decentralized power. And the power should be given to grassroots democracy units, so that governance is more decentralized and freedom of people is protected. So freedom is an important component of radical humanism. Hence, freedom means complete sense of freedom from fears of all kinds. And he's not just talking about freedom of from political control or from state telling you what to do and what not to do. He's talking about freedom at mental level also. So he's not just talking about freedom from political control of a state. He's talking about freedom from fears. Everything is mental. All right, so fear of god, fear of superstitions, a fear of what society will say, etc., that has dominated Indian societies in such a long time. He says you have to break free from all kind of freedoms. Okay, anything that is enslaving you, anything that is making you fearful has to be broken. Okay, so whether it is fear of god, whether it is superstition, etc., you have to break through everything, because freedom is important. And freedom not just at physical level but also at mental level is important. He represented rationalist school of thought, which focuses on science and reason. Same thing that we spoke about when I taught you about Renaissance. Okay, I told you in Renaissance what happened. Reason came out. Okay, reason, that people should reason everything. Just don't believe superstitions, just don't believe whatever the church tells you to do. Have your own brain, apply your own brain. And that's the reason why what happened in Renaissance, you see lot of developments took place in artistic field, in literary field, in scientific field, geographical discoveries took place. Was all because man started applying his reasons rather than believing what the state or what the church wanted him to believe. The same concept of rationalism is applied here. The same concept of reason that John Locke speaks about, okay, is what he is, Memon Roy is also speaking about. Rationalist school of thought, okay, it concentrates on reason, on the rationality of man which is present, which focuses on science and reason. So he says once you break free through all of this superstitions, fear of God, etc., man will start becoming more scientific oriented. Okay, man will become more reasonable, because you're not fearing God, superstitions, etc. There's nothing that is going to enslave you even mentally. So once you do not have any fears mentally, you are more liberated. And because of that, you will use your reason more. You will question everything. You will develop a scientific temper, not just accept anything blindly. You will question it. Why should this happen? Why we should follow this? Only if it applies to, if it appeals to your reason, you will accept it. If it doesn't appeal to your reason, you will reject it. And because you're applying reason, even science and other developments will take place, because reason will help you in keeping your focus on what is important. All right, so this is what he's talking about in radical humanism. Thus freedom is man's struggle for survival. In everyday struggle, you don't want somebody telling you what to do and what not to do. You want certain freedom to yourself. That's exactly what M. N. Roy is talking about. That freedom is a man's struggle for survival. Reason, science, innovation, ethics will help him achieve freedom. According to him, ethics come from science and reason, not from religion. Ethics come from science and reason is because it is more logical, it is more systematic. Okay, because there is science behind it, there is reason behind it, you can question it and come to a reasonable and a logical conclusion. And again, if it applies to you, if it appeals to you, you believe that. If it doesn't appeal to you, there is no force on you to believe a particular value. All right, so everything is decided by your own rationality, everything is decided by your own reason. So that is the concept of freedom. Nobody tells you what to do and what not to do. That freedom is given to you to decide, to analyze, to logically think, to come up with this process of dialectics in your own mind to come to the truth. And if it appeals to you, accept it. If it doesn't appeal to you, reject it. So that freedom is given to you, and this is the freedom which is man's struggle for survival, finding the truth for yourself. We can be free only when our values are based on scientific reasoning. See, he's using the word radical here. Okay, and plus humanism. In humanism comes the concept of reasoning, because human beings have this concept of reason. That is why in human beings are called as thinking animals. We are animals, okay, but we are thinking animals. That is what makes us different from four-legged animals. So humanism is your concept of reason, rationality that is present or inherent in human beings. Okay, which are not required, which society puts on you, which polity puts on you. Once you get rid of all of these fears, your reason will shine through and it will direct you to whatever is important. And that's the reason why you're going against the upheld till now whatever is believed in the society. You are now questioning those beliefs, you are now not believing and not following those beliefs, and that's the reason why you become radical. So that's the reason why it is called as radical humanism. You're questioning stuff, you're not accepting everything just because if everybody follows it. Like J.S. Mill said, don't follow the majoritarian view, have your own view. Like Gramsci said, just because civil society wants you to believe something through hegemony or through hegemonic domination, you don't have to believe it. Even if they're trying to manufacture consent, you have to use your reason. You have to use your logic. You have to use your rationality. You have to use your science. You have to use your reason. And that is the reason why humanism is radical. Okay, class, can you hear me? Class, can you hear me? Okay. Thanks, Anjali. Thanks. Okay, we continue. Okay, so humanism is a philosophy of Renaissance and it represented rationalism too. I've already told you this. All right. The objective of radical humanism was to ensure freedom of individual as humanity was facing moral crisis and required reassertion of humanistic values. See, because everybody was believing in superstitions in society was telling you what is right, what is wrong. So you were not allowed to use your own reasoning. You were not allowed to question whatever was happening in society. And that's the reason why it is called as radical humanism, because it is giving you the freedom. He's giving you freedom under radical humanism to question whatever is happening in the society, only if it applies to your reason, only if it appeals to your reason, you can accept it. If no, you can leave it. So earlier he called it new humanism. Okay, earlier radical humanism was called as new humanism, but later on he changed it to radical humanism. He uses the term radical as he's treating man in a radical sense, that is, in original sense, unlike other philosophies which buried man under the collective ego of a class. See, even in Marxism, all right, we are not individuals. I am not Ankita and you're not each one of you. We are either of the classes that Marx is talking about. Either we are the bourgeois class, the capitalist class, or we are the proletariat class. So we are basically class. Okay, even when you talk about Manu is, again, we are our own varnas. Individuals doesn't matter, we are our varnas. So if my varna is Shudra varna, that is my identity. If I'm Kshatriya varna, that is my identity. Again, it's not individualism, it's collectivism. But again, like I told you, collectivism was always a feature of Indian political thought. That's the reason why for the first time, uh, M.N. Roy is one person who's talking about thinking about human being as an individual, not just talking about him as a part of a nation or a class, talking about individualism. That's the reason why his philosophy or his theory is called as radical humanism, because he's making us think as individuals, not just as a member of a particular varna or as a member of a particular class, not as a member of any collective unit. He wants us to think as individuals, independent individuals. All right. So RH is based, or your radical humanism is based on the concept of sovereignty of man. I've taught you the concept of sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Supreme power given to the state. All right. I taught you sovereignty when I taught you your Thomas Hobbes. All right. And I've spoken to you about John Bodden also. So, sovereignty is your supreme power or supreme command. All right. So, sovereignty of a man is something that is for the first time believed by radical humanism, because sovereignty as a concept we generally associate with the state. State has sovereignty. I've told you what are the four components under modern concept of state: territory, population, government, sovereignty. See, the sovereignty concept is always associated with government, and government is one which constitutes a state. So sovereignty as a concept, whether you talk about Thomas Hobbes, whether you talk about the basic concept of John Bodden speaking about sovereignty, they are all talking about sovereignty from point of view of a state. All right, they're not talking about sovereignty or freedom or complete power of man over himself, not an individualistic point of view. So, for the first time, radical humanism based the concept of sovereignty to individual. It related to individual, and even individual is sovereign. Even individual is free. Even individual is independent enough, supreme enough to decide what is right for him and what is wrong. And he should not always be a member of a cohesive unit or a member of a collective unit. So for the first time, concept of sovereignty of man is given. That's why his concept is called as, that's why his philosophy is called as radical humanism. I've underlined this. All right. So that's why concept of sovereignty of man comes in. The theme of radical humanism is to reorganize society on basis of ethics which are scientific in origin. It's Indian society, so ethics, morals, etc. are going to be there, but only those ethics will continue under radical humanism or according to M. N. Roy, which are scientific in origin, okay, which are based on reason. If a particular ethic can be logically debated, they can be logically analyzed, and it gives a reasonable answer to follow a particular ethic, fine, then we can continue with it. But if that particular ethic or morality, etc., does not have a scientific base, cannot be debated, cannot be discussed on logical reason, and cannot come to a logical conclusion, We are not supposed to follow it. So he wanted to organize, or rather reorganize, the society on basis of ethics which are scientific in origin. Okay, the ones which are based on reason. Now, his views on Gandhi. With this, we ended his concept of radical humanism. Remember the concept of sovereignty. Remember that it was basically humanism. It was basically focusing on radical humanism because sovereignty of a man is given important, because freedom of an individual is given important. It is giving freedom to an individual to decide what is right for him, what is wrong for him. Any ethics, whatever the man wants to follow, should be able to be analyzed, should be able to be concluded through reason, is what he's talking about. All right. His views on Mahatma Gandhi. He has written about him in India in Transition, India's Problems, and 1 year of Non-Cooperation. Remember, I told you his first phase saw non-cooperation, second phase saw civil disobedience. All right, radical humanism phase, he's actually seen your Quit India movement also. So he had written about Gandhi in India in Transition, India's Problems, 1 year of Non-Cooperation, etc. He thought that Mahatma Gandhi discouraged mass actions and was a revivalist, that is, reviving the culture and the religion of a past. Remember the concept of Charkha, the Swadeshi movement, which started because Mahatma Gandhi started realizing that basically the Britishers are making us forcefully making us produce raw materials, taking the raw materials to England, processing them into manufactured goods, and then dumping them into India, and we have to pay double the cost for it. So to fight this evil, he came up with the Charkha concept. So basically, this is when, or this is the reason why he criticized Mahatma Gandhi, saying that Mahatma Gandhi, discouraged mass actions and was a revivalist, reviving the old culture and religion of the past, the Swadeshi movement, the Charkha movement, etc. Again, it is M. N. Roy's personal views, okay? Because you can see non-cooperation movement was a mass action. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi will be swept aside by mass movement as Indian society was undergoing a transition with new social forces emerging and struggling to establish new social order. So he believed that there are new social forces coming, okay, because women have started coming out, they have started participating, etc. Revolutionary people or revolutionaries were doing their own work to, get freedom for India. So there were new social forces emerging, and he said these new social forces will create a new social order in India. He felt that non-violence will ultimately result in violence. He said that, listen, this concept of non-violence does not work. One day or the other, it is going to end up or transition into violence, because non-violence is just a mask for hiding true exploitation of capitalism. So he's saying that, listen, how much ever you talk about ahimsa, etc., finally, one day or the other, the wheel is going to be lifted and it's going to lead to violence. Okay, non-violence is only a means to hide true exploitation of capitalism. You have to understand, capitalism is definitely going to be his biggest enemy, because he believed in Marxism, and for Marxism, capitalism, or whatever you want to call it as, bourgeois, was its biggest enemy. Okay, so he said that, listen, finally, non-violence is a mask of hiding true exploitation of capitalism. That is again his views. The concept of Charkha was reactionary and tried to unite the exploiter with exploited. So he said that, listen, this Swadeshi movement concept, the concept of using Charkha, you are mixing the bourgeois class and the proletariat class together. What is the proletariat class? People like you and me, Indians, who will use the Charkha. So now you are also becoming profit oriented, because you are creating manufactured goods which are going to sell, all right, even if for lower prices compared to the British products, but still you're going to sell, so you also have profit making. So what is the difference between the proletariat involved in Charkha and Swadeshi movement as well as the Britishers? So you are mixing both of them. You're mixing the exploiters with exploited, because both of them are doing the same thing, producing goods, putting them in the market and asking people to buy it. So he said Charkha is reactionary, wherein it tried to unite the exploiters with the exploited. So he was critical of Mahatma Gandhi. because he said, okay, Mahatma Gandhi will be swept aside by mass movement. Mahatma Gandhi discouraged mass actions. He was a revivalist. He was reviving the charkha culture, which was basically reactionary and which tried to unite the exploiters with the exploited. So because of this, he was very critical of Mahatma Gandhi. But people change. So M.N. Roy also changed, and his views changed post the death of Mahatma Gandhi, wherein he called him a great martyr. His article, written after the death of Mahatma Gandhi, was titled Message of the Martyr and Homage to the Martyr in 1948, stated that Mahatma Gandhi, as a humanist who had cosmopolitan appeal and who used mass action for political purpose for attending independence. Complete antithesis, 180 degrees. All right. But that view changed after the death of Mahatma Gandhi. So during his lifetime, he was very critical. But after the death of Mahatma Gandhi, plus you have to understand that before the death of Mahatma Gandhi, India had already achieved her independence. So because of this, his views had changed about Mahatma Gandhi, because yes, mass movements had given us Indian freedom struggle. The Charkha movement, the Swadeshi movement had been successful to a certain extent. Okay. Plus the ultimate demise of Mahatma Gandhi, for whatever reasons, we don't have to get into that, okay, made him believe that yes, Mahatma Gandhi was a humanist. He was somebody who had reason, he had reasons, and that's the reason why he came up with all these mass movements, which ultimately led to India getting its freedom. He had cosmopolitan appeal, not just the Indian National Congress, who had the Western educated people, even uneducated people, all right, or women, Adivasis, all of these people could be brought together, mobilized together by Mahatma Gandhi. So he had definitely had cosmopolitan appeal, who used mass action to gain independence. So he's finally accepting in Mahatma Gandhi's role in getting India's independence. Okay, with this we end your M.N. Roy. Now, class, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions. Anybody has any questions? Class, anybody has any questions here? Okay, no, ma'am. All right, fine. Now, again, now just show me your hands up. Okay. But all of you seem to be liking Indian political thought more than Western political thought, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Now, class, I'm going to ask you, because today we have completed your Sri Aurobindo as well as M.N. Roy. Do you want me to continue and start with Mahatma Gandhi? Are you okay with me starting Mahatma Gandhi? Or if you want, we can continue it next time. I'm going to ask you because you have to learn. All right. I have no problems. You tell me. Just show me a thumbs up rather than your chat. Just show me a thumbs up. Okay. Mansi, next time. Himanshu, no, ma'am. Okay. Fine. Fine, fine. No problems. Kritika, what is your view? Aditi, Tejas is very silent today. What happened, Tejas? Next time, ma'am. Okay, okay, fine, fine, fine. So if you don't have any questions today, we'll stop here. Okay, we'll do Mahatma Gandhi next time. Be fresh. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi is very lengthy. All right. So be fresh next time and keep a book ready if you want to write down something, because in Mahatma Gandhi, there are going to be a lot of concepts I want to talk to you about. All right. So we'll stop here today. All right. See you next time.